Welcome to the second in my series of meditations on my favourite science fiction novels. I appreciate you joining me. I'd just like to warn you that there will be some spoilers ahead, so please beware. First published in 1974, Joe Haldeman's The Forever War is an all-time science fiction classic. It's not just a great science fiction and military science fiction novel, but it's a great war novel regardless of the genre. Now, I first read this book shortly after it was published, and then I immediately read it again, and then again. And I think to this day I've read this book at least once a year and have worn out several copies because it's that good. Now, interestingly, I read it initially not long after reading Robert Heinlein's Starship Troopers. I love both books equally, and superficially they are similar, but they come to quite different conclusions in the end. So on the surface, The Forever War is a deceptively simple story of humans and their interstellar war against the mysterious Taurans. But it's so much more than that. And unlike the earlier counterpart, Starship Troopers, it takes a much more jaundiced approach to the war and ultimately makes several strong points about the futility of interstellar war and therefore war in general. One thing I love in particular about The Forever War is that it doesn't beat you over the head with narrative exposition to make this point, and it achieves it perfectly well by allowing the story to do it and allowing the characters and their experiences to speak. It's a lesson that many modern writers could do with being reminded of. But it does all this as well without sacrificing the compelling descriptions of future military life and the visceral descriptions of the battles. So, written while the Vietnam War was still raging, Haldeman draws many parallels between the experiences of the grunts fighting the unseen and unknown Taurans and that conflict, and particularly the alienation of the troops when they return home to a vastly different planet Earth from when they left. So, what is the story? The book is set in 1997, at least to begin with, and just as an aside, whilst that seems fairly anachronistic now that we're in 2021, Haldeman himself in the liner notes for the 1998 version commented on this and said, well, in a way, just kind of treat it as a parallel universe now. Think of it as that, because the dates don't line up anymore. And then the story follows the first-person narrated journey of physics student William Mandela, who is conscripted by the United Nations into what is an elite IQ exploratory force who are being sent to fight the Taurans, who are accused of attacking human colonies. The early stages of Mandela's service deal with the grueling training held on a remote frigid planet Charon. This is on the fringes of the solar system. This was actually prior to the discoveries of the moons of Pluto and the one that we now call Charon. That's just a little aside. It doesn't really detract from the descriptions of that planet, and I really enjoyed that description of the training held there in the extremely difficult conditions and the ingenuity shown by the squad when disaster struck during that training. It's really gripping stuff, and they really do work together to save lives. The story then develops with a series of battles in the war, and this is where the title of the book, The Forever War, begins to come into play. So in this particular story, interstellar travel is possible using collapsers, which are really collapsed stars. And the journey is instant for the travelers, but then relativistic time dilation kicks in. So for them, every time they return to Earth after this trip, dozens, if not hundreds of years have passed on planet Earth. So for them, human society has moved on, and the returning troops are increasingly alienated and isolated from the planet that they are actually fighting for, mirroring many of the experiences of the vets at the time of the writing of the novel, and indeed vets through history. and albeit that that's portrayed in an exaggerated way because of the number of time jumps that these guys have to do. And I did find that the depictions each time the return of human society, the hundreds of years advancing, I found those depictions extremely plausible. Major changes in race, sexuality, language, and customs, and it developed in such a way that those troops feel much like a Neolithic caveman would feel if reincarnated today. Now, along the way to the conclusion, Mandela and co, they have to overcome some tricky technical challenges. They have to fight in some bizarre and brutal battles. And I think another particularly gripping scene is the hand-to-hand combat conducted in a battle that they hold, or fight they hold in a stasis field with the Torrens. Found that one particularly gripping. So I'm not going to spoil the ending or the conclusions of the book for you, but this is one of the most readable books in science fiction history, or indeed in any genre, come to that, and I'd urge you to pick up a copy if you've never read it. You will not be disappointed. So thanks very much for listening. If you enjoyed this short meditation, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications. For the next book in this series of classic science fiction novels, I'll be discussing Arthur C. Clarke's Rendezvous with Rama, a story about the exploration of a strange alien artifact that enters the solar system. But till then, I hope you all stay well.